She broke my heart on a gray Saturday in Bloomington. My name got dragged through the mud by a crime I didn't commit, and 4 decades later, a spit-in-a-tube DNA test proved I had a son I never knew existed. One letter locked in a banker's box changed the truth I'd lived with my whole life. And I'm telling you right now, the love I lost came back to me with hair gone silver and a tremble in her laugh. And the way it happened still keeps me up at night. Hey folks, it's Frank from Mind-Blowing Stories. Pull up a chair. Before we dive in, do this old boy a kindness. Hit that subscribe button. I checked the numbers, and 96% of you who watch are not subscribed. That stings a little, I won't lie. If you enjoy these stories, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, clicked like, and dropped a comment when I'm done. Tell me what you'd have done in my shoes. All right, here we go. I grew up on the east side of Indianapolis in a red brick duplex that always smelled like coffee and pine sol. Mom worked nights at the hospital, orthopedic wing, steel toes, and a back brace under her scrub top. Dad left when I was 9.5. We used to joke that he joined the witness protection program of bad decisions. The truth is simpler. A man will run from a mirror that shows him a smaller man than he wants to be. Anyhow, it was just me, my little sister Jenny, and Mom, who could fix a leaky sink with a butter knife and a prayer. By the time I got to Indiana University, I had a part-time job washing dishes at a place called the Monarch on Kirkwood. Good tips if you stayed late to mop. My plan was modest. Get a business degree, save up enough to move west, where the air was rumored to smell like oranges and car wax. I wasn't hunting for love, not then. Love hunted me. Her name was Lydia Hart. First time I saw her, she was on the other side of the diner counter, hair tucked under a knit cap, a stack of music theory books balanced on one knee. Her laugh tipped forward before it arrived, like she had to lean into it. She ordered black coffee, then pushed a sugar packet toward me and said, "If I promise not to waste this on the table, will you bring me a real donut, not one of those skinny ones you call health food?" I told her no donut could withstand the glare of our cook, Vernon, who had opinions about pastries. She stuck around anyway, nibbling what she called birdseed toast, and we talked through the late shift. She was from Carmel, which might as well have been Paris to me back then. Her daddy owned a contracting firm that built half the new schools in the county. They had a circular driveway and a piano that had its own name. I had a Chevy Caprice with a dent like an elbow on the passenger door. 2 weeks later, I took her to the drive-in. It rained and the movie soaked into the windshield until all the actors were just soft shapes with voices too big for their faces. We didn't finish the movie. I learned where the small of her back met my palm like it had been waiting. What came next wasn't a fireworks show so much as a long summer evening where you keep thinking the sun's gone down, but it hasn't. She'd sit by my secondhand record player, legs folded under her, playing notes on my arm with her fingers. While we listened to Bruce Springsteen and records of Chopin her mother said were too sentimental. She was a music major who wanted to write film scores. I was a business major who wanted to get out of town. The map looked possible, and for a while the two paths ran exactly side by side. We made plans. I got a job at a little jewelry store on Kirkwood, sweeping floors and polishing cases. The owner, a short man named Mr. Gold, yes really, took a shine to me. He taught me how to read diamond clarity with a loupe. I never did feel right about those stones. Felt like staring into snow that remembered bones. But I liked the gold bands. Rings made sense to me. Circles that kept a promise. I bought one. It wasn't much. A slender band with a tiny sapphire that flashed like a blue eye when the light hit it right. I hid it in a folded sock under the liner in my trunk. I asked Lydia to meet me at Leonard Springs the next Saturday. She said yes with that laugh that fell forward before it arrived. I didn't make it to Saturday. On Thursday afternoon, the campus police showed up at the jewelry store. Mr. Gold's mouth made a straight line so fast it scared me. They said they had a warrant to search my locker at the student gym. And there in the pocket of my gym bag, wrapped in a paper towel like a leftover biscuit, was a necklace with 3 teardrop diamonds. I hadn't seen it before. I said so. Mr. Gold couldn't meet my eyes. They held me long enough to make damn sure the rumor ran faster than I could. The store had had an inventory discrepancy. I didn't get arrested, not technically. The necklace was returned. I got fired. The dean's office summoned me like I was a dog that had tracked mud into the living room. There were words like academic integrity thrown at me by men who paused after they spoke, like the sentence would sound better echoing. I spent the night in my caprice in the lot outside the Monarch because I couldn't face telling Lydia. But she found me. Of course she did. That girl could smell trouble on me at 100 yards. I started to explain, and she just climbed into the passenger seat and put both hands on my face and said, "Tell me everything." I did. We went back and forth. She believed me. She swore she did. But you can believe someone and still be pulled under by the tide of what other people are saying about them. That's one of the crueler facts of being human. Her father asked to meet me the next day. I stood in that big white foyer of their house out in Carmel, trying not to gawk at the painting over the fireplace. A woman in a blue dress who looked like Lydia through a glass of water. Mr. Hart wore a navy blazer and the kind of grin that thought it was doing charity. He told me he had spoken to a friend on the board. Better to withdraw quietly than to be suspended for a disciplinary infraction. He said words like future prospects and wrong crowd, and unfortunately. He said the kindest thing I could do for his daughter was let her walk away clean from a boy who had let himself get messy. I told him I didn't steal anything. He handed me an envelope. Cash, a lot of it. He said it wasn't a bribe. He called it a cushion, a way to land this fall without breaking something important that might never heal right. He said if I loved his daughter, I would not drag her through my drama. He implied that if I made noise about the necklace, other stories might surface. He had a way of speaking that made everything he said feel like it had already been decided. I didn't take the money. I didn't quit school either. Not yet. I asked Lydia to believe me a second time and to keep our Saturday plan at Leonard Springs. She said yes. We'd figure it out, she said, once we were away from this. We could start fresh. Denver, I could sell used cars. She could study at the university out there. None of it seemed impossible. On Saturday, I waited by the footbridge. The creek ran over stones like whispering teeth. I checked the sock in my jacket pocket 100 times. No Lydia. I walked back to the parking lot twice to check if my Caprice was still there, as if that was the missing piece. I heard a car. It wasn't hers. It was her father. He stepped out and held the envelope like he was doing me a favor by carrying it. "She isn't coming," he said. "She knows now." There were other things he could tell me, but he would prefer not to, for her sake. And he set the envelope on the passenger seat of my car and left. I opened it and the smell of paper and ink swelled out like a punch. I don't know why I took it then. Maybe because I thought money would turn the world's volume down. I didn't spend it at first. I just put it under the liner of my trunk, next to the ring and the sock, like maybe the two lies would cancel each other out. That week I got a letter from the dean. Withdraw or be expelled. I withdrew. The letter used phrases like mutual decision. Another letter came, 3 lines long. Lydia, written slantwise saying she needed space to think. No signature. I wrote back. I wrote again. No answer. You can drown in a month. You can drown in a week if the water knows you. I drove to Houston because there was work in the oil fields and no one asked about your past if you showed up when it was still dark and you stayed till the sweat dried into crust the color of dust. I sent letters to Lydia from a P.O. box near the camp. I got one back, once, with a stamp that looked like it had been peeled off and stuck back on. It said, "Please stop. Take care of yourself." She said her father had hired someone to sort her mail while she focused on classes. It sounded like a made-up job until you met a man like Charles Hart. Then it sounded like Tuesday. I didn't date. I didn't drink much either. I sent money to Mom to help with the mortgage. When the envelope of cash from Mr. Hart finally felt more like a weight than a buoy, I spent it on something that felt like it might build me instead of rot me. Night classes in accounting. Nothing romantic about it, but the numbers didn't talk behind your back. 2 years later, I met June. She was a nurse like Mom, but with a laugh that was dirt road loud and a habit of tapping her pen against her knuckle when she was thinking. We got married at the courthouse on a Tuesday. I wore a tie I'd bought at a thrift store for $2 because the pattern reminded me of the inside of an orange. It was a good marriage for a while. We wanted kids. The wanting itself became a third person in the room, sometimes louder than the television. We had a miscarriage. We didn't bounce back from that the same. Sometimes a wound closes like it's supposed to, but the skin doesn't remember how to feel. Life moves like a shopping cart with one wheel that won't stay straight. You keep adjusting without even noticing. I went from oil to insurance because my back started talking to me in vowels only dogs could hear. We moved to a little house in Terre Haute. June and I bought a dog named Beans who would sit with his chin on your knee like he was trying to talk you down from something. We drifted. There's no villain in a drift. We split up. Not angry, but done. She remarried a good man who taught high school shop and knew the names of every neighbor's kid. I won't pretend I didn't think about Lydia. I did. Way a man thinks about a pocket knife he lost in a cornfield in the 5th grade, an object small enough to fit in his palm and somehow too big to forget. Time is the only investor that keeps throwing money at a bad bet. It rolled me up in it. I turned 50, then 60. Mom got sick and I moved back to Indy to help take care of her, then stood alone in the yard one February morning, staring at the patch where we used to grow tomatoes and trying to remember whether we'd ever gotten more than 2 ripe ones at a time. Jenny's boy, my nephew Colin, bought me one of those DNA kits for Christmas. You know the ones. Spit in a little tube, learn you're 5% Scottish and 60% stubborn. I stuck it on the shelf for 3 months. Then one afternoon, the sunlight hit the box in a way that made me think of a brass doorknob and a garden I was not supposed to enter. I did it. I mailed it. I forgot about it. Life had bills and the dog needed his teeth cleaned, and I'd started this channel, Mind-Blowing Stories, because an old friend from the oil field said, "Frank, you tell stories like you're pulling folks up into your truck cab, and the world could use a ride." 3 weeks later, I got an email that said new relative match found. The bar at the top was red. It said parent-child. I stared at it until the screen timed out. I touched it like it might burn me. The name was Benjamin Cole. Age 38. Location, Ohio. A little message bubble blinked and became real words. "Hello, Franklin Mallory. My name is Ben. I was adopted in 1983 in Indiana. The non-identifying info says my birth mother was a college music student and my father worked in retail. I'm on this site hoping to find medical history. I am very open to contact if you are." I made a sound that startled Beans so bad he knocked his water bowl over. I wrote back. I took a breath first. I told him I would answer anything he wanted. I told him I was sorry for not knowing. He replied with a photo. A man with my mother's cheekbones and my grandfather's ears, wearing a ball cap pulled low, holding a baby girl whose smile looked like the lid of a sugar jar left ajar. Ben said he had a mother and father who raised him with patience and Saturday pancakes. He wasn't looking to replace anything. He just wanted to fill in pages that came blank and now could maybe hold ink. We met in a coffee shop on Meridian. I knew him the minute he walked in. There was a way he carried his shoulders that made me think of my own body like it belonged to 2 people. He hugged me like a man hugs a stranger he wants to trust. I don't have words for that hug that don't sound like a hymn. We talked for hours. He told me about his work on trucks, long haul. He told me about his wife, Rachel, who runs a little bakery out of their house and makes a pecan pie that will make you put your face down on the table and cry. He didn't ask me a single cruel question. He asked me if I was okay. He asked me if I wanted to know about the day he was born. We didn't know the truth of that yet, not the whole of it. That night, after he left, I wrote to an old friend from those college days, a guy named Eddie who had kept a box in the back of his closet for me after I left. Stuff I couldn't carry to Texas. He still had it. He mailed it to me. Inside was one of those spiral notebooks where you write everything until the ink runs out, and a handful of letters tied with string that had gone the color of tea. I recognized the paper before I read a word. Lydia's stationery, creamy, a watermark that looked like a lily if you squinted. The letters were unopened, my name on them, written in that forward-leaning slant. I took them out and then put them back in, and then took them out again, like I was trying to figure out which arrangement of objects would make time behave. There were 6, dated over 2 months after I left Bloomington. Inside, the first said she had missed the Saturday because she went to meet me, and her father intercepted her in the driveway with a lie I didn't deserve. He'd told her that I had taken the cash and used it to disappear, that I'd confessed to Mr. Gold after all, that I'd tried to blame her father to save face. She said she'd realized later he was manipulating her, but that morning his voice had the heft of law. The second letter said she went to my dorm, and they told her I had withdrawn. She went to the Monarch and Vernon said I'd left town. She wrote that she was late. The sentence sat by itself. I read every letter. She moved through panic into a kind of steady fear that felt like a new job she took against her will. She told me in the fourth that her father had sent her to stay with an aunt in Ohio. She wrote the words, "I am 7 months along, and I am still not ready to be someone's mother, but I love this child." She said she named the boy in her belly when she was alone, whispered the name in the bathtub like a promise the drain wouldn't hear. She chose Benjamin because she liked the way it felt like a stone you could hold in your fist and be braver. The last letter said a social worker had come with 2 profiles of families. She chose one with a dog and a swing set already in the yard. She said, "Please don't hate me." She said, "Please, if you forgive me, I will carry that forgiveness like a coat in winter for the rest of my life." I called Ben at 10 at night. I told him I had letters. He said he was sitting in his truck in a lot in Dayton finishing a grilled cheese, and he could meet me in 90 minutes. That boy drove like a promise. We spread the letters on my kitchen table and read them together, the 2 of us leaning in like it was a board game we both wanted to win, but didn't know the rules to yet. He cried. I did too. I don't care how tough you think you are. Some truths knocked the door in. We sat there till the streetlight outside blinked off, and the neighbor's sprinklers tried to talk sense into the grass. The next day I did the thing I should have done 1,000 times in my head. I found Lydia. Internet makes a detective out of anyone who still remembers landlines. She taught piano now, out of a small house off Keystone. She was widowed. I stood at the bottom of her short walkway with the solar lights that made puddles of brightness on the concrete, and my fingers trembled so hard I had to put them in my pockets. She opened the door and the years fell off her and onto the porch like leaves. Some people carry time like a backpack. Lydia carried it like a thin scarf, wrapped twice around and still fluttering. We looked at each other long enough to make a neighbor across the street pretend to water her hydrangeas. Then Lydia took my hand and led me inside. I tried to speak and couldn't. She saved us both. She said, "I have rehearsed 10,000 openings and all of them are wrong, so I am going to say, 'Hello, Frank.'" "Hello," I said. She made tea. We sat at the table beside a stack of sheet music with pencil marks in the margins, circles around places where a student needed to soften. She showed me a photo in a frame by the stove. Her husband, Daniel, a kind man with a history teacher's grin. He had been gone 5 years. a heart that did its job without complaint and then decided to stop politely. She'd been alone since. I told her about my life. She told me about hers. The parts we had kept living in parallel came out like two radio stations you can hear at the same time if you hold the dial just so. Then I told her about Ben. I watched her hand cover her mouth like she was trying to keep her heart from falling out. She said, "The woman who chose him and his wife, it was right. I know it was right. But oh God, Frank, I wanted to be brave in another way." We cried again. You can run out of tears in one day and find more the next. It's not about the supply, it's about the demand. She told me something I didn't expect. On the day I married June, long before she married Daniel, she had driven to the courthouse with the ring and the sock. She had found Mr. Gold and he told her the truth. He hadn't believed I stole anything. He had been pressured. The inventory discrepancy had been a single piece put in the wrong drawer, and the campus police were friends with Mr. Hart from a hunting lodge, where men told each other stories about their own nobility. Mr. Gold cried when he said it. Lydia said she drove to the courthouse and saw me through a window, my hand on June's back, and she sat in her car and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel until the horn stuck, and then she drove home and did not speak for 3 days. You think the hurt is a mountain, and then you find out it has a second side and no peak. I asked her if she could forgive me for leaving. She laughed in a way that wasn't unkind but was a little sharp around the edges. "Frank," she said, "you didn't leave. You were pushed with 2 hands by a man who couldn't imagine his daughter would love a boy who didn't know how to order wine." Then her voice softened. "But yes, I forgive you. I have to. Loving you felt clean. Losing you felt like rolling around in a ditch and trying to call that a bath." We sat with that. It didn't fix anything. It made a space where a fix might go. We met Ben together a week later. He brought his wife and their little girl, Mila, who wanted to show us her glitter sneakers and her ability to pronounce spaghetti like it was the name of a foreign king. Lydia held Mila like she was a hymn, and Ben looked at Lydia like he was a house finally seeing the architect. He called her by her first name until she put her hand over his and said, "You can call me whatever you want." And he tried Mother once, and she cried like a flood happening inside a church. You think this is where the story climbs a hill and then coasts down the other side? But life is trickier than that. We had another turn coming. It came in the shape of a brown envelope that arrived 3 months later with a return address from a law firm in Carmel. The letter inside said Charles Hart's estate had been settled years earlier, but that one safety deposit box had remained unclaimed, registered to Lydia's mother, who had passed some time after him. They were obliged to try to find next of kin. The key was taped to the paper like a secret pretzel. We drove to the bank. The vault door sighed open like a whale exhaling. Inside the box were 2 smaller envelopes. One held a stack of letters I recognized at once. My letters. Everyone I'd ever sent Lydia after I left, opened and then neatly refolded and tied with ribbon, like a hostage tied to a chair in a polite room. The second envelope held a single page, typed on a machine that made its letters a little uneven, like a drunk trying to line up at a parade. It was from her father, dated the month before he died. It said that a man raises a daughter and believes he is the sun by which she moves, and eventually he realizes he is either a gravity that helps her orbit or a heat that burns her away. He said he had been the latter. He admitted he had arranged with a campus police officer to place the necklace in my bag. He admitted he had paid Mr. Gold to turn his face a certain way to help the story along. He admitted he had hired a private mailbox service to intercept Lydia's dorm mail and forward anything that looked like it was from me to a post office box he maintained for just one purpose: control. At the bottom he wrote that he had been sorry many times, and that the funny thing about sorrow is how useless it is to the person you broke. He asked for forgiveness he did not deserve. Lydia put the letter down and then picked it up and then put it down again. She stood in the vault with her hands on the cool metal edge of that box, and I watched her shoulders square like she was about to carry a load she had carried so long she didn't recognize it as weight. Then she sighed and her face changed, like a piece of music that resolves finally to the note it had been chasing in circles. She turned to me and said, "I am ready to stop being that girl." We took the letters home. We read them to each other out loud, trading paragraphs, our voices tripping over the parts where we were too young to know what we were promising. Ben listened, head down like a man at the foot of a grave, reading the name over and over until it becomes his own. We burned the letter from Mr. Hart in a coffee can in the backyard, not out of anger so much as to set a mark that would tell time this is where the road turns. This is the part where I tell you what happened to us. Not the past us, the ones who sat on that back step watching smoke curl like a ribbon you finally let go. We fell in love again. That's the plain truth. But it wasn't the summer sky kind of love of 1981. It was a winter love that knows how to make soup. It was a love that understood medication schedules and knee pain, and the way you can get tired in the lean parts between holidays. We started small. Coffee at 9 on Tuesdays. A walk at the reservoir on Sundays, sometimes slow because her hip would complain if we pushed. She taught me to listen for the moments in a day when music sneaks in and sits down, even if there's no piano in the room. I taught her how to change a tire without overthinking it. We learned each other's scars like reading old maps and finding the trailheads circled in a shaky hand. We didn't rush. I had learned what rushing cost. We talked about getting married and decided against it. Not because we were scared, because it felt like we'd already promised what we needed to promise, and the rest was logistics and cake. She moved back into the house where she had once taught music to 12-year-olds with sticky hands. I stayed in mine. We cross-pollinated our evenings like bees. Ben became family, which is to say he showed up with moving boxes and 2 passengers who needed naps and a drill with the battery never quite charged. We met his parents. Good people. I shook the hand of the man who had taught my boy how to throw a baseball, and I thanked him with a kind of gratitude that made my throat feel like a gate I was holding open with everything I had. There is room for more than one father in this world if you make it. Don't let anyone tell you different. One spring afternoon, Lydia and I drove down to Bloomington. The campus looked like it had been polished for company. The Monarch had become a coffee place with reclaimed wood tables and a chalkboard menu, boasting drinks that sounded like poetry assignments. We ordered 2 regular coffees because we are simple in some ways, and we took them to the bench outside. I pulled a small thing out of my pocket. The ring. The sock had long since dissolved into dust in some drawer. But the ring was still there, a circle that kept a promise even when the people didn't. I told her I wanted to give it to her now, not as a proposal, but as a return. The past wanted this to be yours, I said. I don't want the past to be in charge anymore. She laughed and then cried and then slid it on, and it fit like a secret that had been telling the truth the whole time. You are probably thinking this must be the biggest twist, but we had one more. We were sitting in a restaurant near the courthouse afterward, splitting a cheeseburger because we pretend we are young and then remember we are not, and Lydia went quiet in that way that made me pay attention. She set her hand on the table and looked at it like it held the answer to a riddle. She told me she had been forgetting things lately. Names, mostly. A student's phone number she'd had memorized for a decade. The word for the little hook that holds a cabinet door closed. I said that happens to me every day before breakfast. She smiled without lifting her cheeks. She said she'd gone to her doctor. They were running tests. I did not sleep well for weeks. We got the results under a sky so blue it felt rude. Mild cognitive impairment. That phrase sounds like a shrug pretending to be a diagnosis. It is what it is. But if you sit with it long enough, you start to see the shapes in it. The doctor said we might have years before it turned into something that took more than it gave. Or maybe it would never go there. No one can predict the future, even the ones who wish they could. I asked Lydia what she wanted. She said what she wanted was to keep teaching until she called one kid by another's name and it hurt the wrong kid, and then she would stop. She wanted to drive to the lake on Thursdays and watch the sailboats practice like white buttons learning to float. She wanted to make a pie that would make me put my face on the table and cry. She said she wanted to hold my hand while we crossed the street because sometimes it felt like the traffic was made of ideas, and she wanted to be sure the one in front of her was the one she meant to step into. We made a plan without calling it a plan. We gathered up our people. We told Ben. He took it like a man takes a load he wishes he could take for someone else. He asked what he could do. I told him the truth. Show up. He did. Every Sunday he calls us both on speaker and tells us about storms he drove through and the bakery orders getting out of hand. Sometimes he puts Mila on and we get 3 minutes of someone telling us about glitter as if it were weather. We did a small ceremony in the backyard for ourselves. Not a wedding exactly. More like two people saying out loud what they had already been doing for a while. We wrote vows on index cards because we are who we are. I promised to respect the good minutes and not keep count of the bad ones. She promised to tell me the things she was losing so I could make room in my pockets to carry them. Ben stood there with Rachel and Mila, and my sister Jenny held the dog because he was stressed by the concept of balloons. We ate pie, pecan. I did try to put my face on the table and cry. I am nothing if not a man of my word. A year went by. Then 2. Some days are windless now. Some mornings Lydia looks at the kettle and calls it the water horn, and we laugh because that is a better name anyway. Some days she plays a piece on the piano with her eyes closed, and I think if this is what forgetting looks like, then remembering never had a chance. She keeps a notebook on the coffee table where she writes down the names of the people she loves, and then the names of vegetables that make her happy to look at when she opens the refrigerator. It is a strange list, but the world is strange, and we get to decide what to keep. Sometimes I think about Charles Hart, not with anger anymore. He was a man terrified the world would change in a way that revealed he wasn't necessary. I have known that fear. It is not an excuse. It is a fact that builds a bridge I choose not to cross. Sometimes I think about Mr. Gold. I visited him once, long after the envelope from the bank. He had retired to Florida and had a tan like a paperback. He cried when I told him I knew. He said he had been a coward and that cowards can be good at casseroles and still do damage. I told him I forgave him, and I meant it. Forgiving a coward does not make him brave, but it unhooks something in you that was caught. I walked out of his condo with a brochure for a shuffleboard league and a feeling like the air had decided to be lighter. But most days I think about the ordinary. The way Lydia's hair curls at the ends when it rains. The way Ben says, "Hey, Pop," when he calls now. Like the word weighed nothing, and then suddenly the weight found a home in me and decided to be comfortable. The way Mila explains the world as if it were a story that had been waiting for her narration all along. I think about the ring on Lydia's finger and how the sapphire flashes blue when she waters the fern by the front window, and the afternoon slides across it like a lake of light. You ask what the moral is. People like a moral. Feels like a ribbon to tie the package with. I don't know if there's one. I know that sometimes love is interrupted by men who think they know what's best, and sometimes it is interrupted by our own foolishness, and sometimes by the weather. I know that time is a thief, but occasionally it returns some of what it stole, wrapped in paper you didn't know you'd saved. I know this. If you have something to say to someone you loved a long time ago, and you are carrying that silence like bricks in your coat, put the coat down. You do not get points for freezing politely. And for those of you who have asked me in the comments on other videos whether the stories I tell are real, here is my answer. Real is a word people use when they want the world to be more straightforward than it is. This story is the truest thing I have. If it fits your shape of real, I'm grateful. If it doesn't, I hope it fits your shape of hope. When Lydia misplaces a word now, we go for a walk. We name trees: birch, maple, elm. Sometimes we give up and call them handsome. That works too. We sit on the bench outside the little ice cream stand that used to be a gas station, and we split a vanilla cone because some loves are basic on purpose. She tucks her hand into my elbow when we cross back over the street. She calls it traffic, even when there's only one car and a bicycle with a basket full of milk. I tell her the truth I told her that first summer, and the truth I have learned since. We are going forward. Even when it feels sideways, even when it feels like we are going around in circles, we are circling something worth guarding. I started telling these stories on camera because talking into a lens felt less lonely some evenings than talking to the wall. Now I've got this little community of folks who pull up a chair at my kitchen table without leaving their living rooms. You've listened all the way through. That means something to me. More than I can say without sounding like I'm selling you on a set of steak knives. So I'll end the way I began. I'm Frank. This is Mind-Blowing Stories. Do a man a favor. Hit subscribe. 96% of you who watch aren't subscribed, and that puts a dent right in my old heart. Toss this video a like so other folks find it. Leave a comment and tell me what you think about second chances and the letters that get lost and the ones that finally make their way home. And if you've got a love story that got interrupted and then picked up again in a different season, I'm all ears. We're still here. That counts for more than folks admit. Thanks for listening. Be good to each other. And if your life hands you a ring and an old sock and a letter that changes everything after the ink has dried, go ahead and put your face down on the table and cry. Then get up. There's soup on the stove and a hand to hold across the street if you want it.